Why are you speaking to my son? The icy voice of Eleanor Wexler echoed through the grand marble hallway of her $40 million estate. She was the heiress to a pharmaceutical empire, used to control and perfection. But nothing prepared her for the sight before her. A black cleaning woman in a blue apron, sitting cross-legged on the floor next to her 7-year-old autistic son, Nathaniel. That woman was Mariah James, unknown to Eleanor, once a renowned linguistics professor who had taught at 3 top universities before life forced her into obscurity. For 3 months, she had worked silently in the Wexler household, unnoticed, invisible, until now. Eleanor's tone was sharp, almost mocking. Nathaniel hasn't spoken in 2 years. Now I find you here, whispering foreign words into his ears. What exactly are you doing? What Mariah was doing was unlocking a mind no one had bothered to understand. Nathaniel held a picture book in Italian, one he had retrieved himself. Days ago, Mariah had murmured greetings in Spanish, French, German as she cleaned, not expecting anything. But Nathaniel had responded. 1 word, then 2. Now he looked up at her and whispered in flawless French, "Merci, madame." For Eleanor, time stopped. The child she believed to be lost had just spoken. This was not magic. This was not luck. This was the power of seeing what others chose not to see and daring to speak in the language a silent heart finally understood. Sometimes the most powerful revolution begins in a basement, with a whisper, not a war. For months, Mariah James swept the marble floors of the Wexler mansion in silence. She scrubbed windows, folded linens, and mopped staircases. No one ever asked her name. No one ever looked past her blue apron or her downcast eyes. But Mariah had a secret, a past. Life as Dr. Mariah James, Ph.D. in applied linguistics from Columbia, a published scholar in neurodivergent language acquisition. A life that ended the moment her mother's illness forced her into debt, forcing her to accept any job that would pay for hospital bills. She never expected to find hope again, especially not in the eyes of a child who hadn't spoken in 2 years. Nathaniel Wexler was 7 years old, diagnosed with severe autism by 3 leading neurologists. To his mother, Eleanor Wexler, a billionaire widow, with a heart locked behind years of grief and societal pressure, Nathaniel was a tragedy to be managed, not a soul to be understood. She hired tutors, specialists, therapists. None of them succeeded. None of them could get him to speak. But Mariah wasn't trying to fix him. She was listening. It started by accident. As she cleaned, she softly muttered words in different languages under her breath. She had always found comfort in rhythm and sound, French lullabies, Spanish greetings, the gentle tones of Italian. One afternoon, as she passed by the playroom, she noticed Nathaniel flinch, not in fear but in recognition, when she said bonjour. From then on, she spoke intentionally, softly, casually. Hola, as she folded laundry. Ciao, as she passed by the hallway. Danke, as she arranged flowers. And then it happened. Hola, Nathaniel whispered one morning, his voice shaky but real. Mariah froze. She didn't respond, not immediately. She didn't want to frighten him. Instead, she sat beside him, pulled out an Italian picture book from the shelf, and began reading, slowly. From that day on, their quiet sessions continued in secret. Mariah never touched him, never asked him to respond. She simply opened the door of language and let him step in when he was ready. But everything changed when Eleanor found them. She stormed into the room, furious. "You're a cleaning lady. You don't talk to my son. You don't teach my son." She accused Mariah of using Nathaniel as an experiment. "He has severe autism. He won't get better. He's not capable." Mariah stayed calm. "With all due respect, ma'am, sometimes children don't need to be fixed. They need to be spoken to in the language they understand. Eleanor laughed in disbelief, until Nathaniel looked up from his book and said, "Mercy, Madame." It was the first time he had spoken a full sentence in 2 years. In perfect French. Eleanor was shaken. But instead of embracing the miracle, she retreated into denial. The next morning, she called Mariah to her office. "What happened yesterday was a coincidence," she said coldly. "From now on, stay away from my son." Mariah returned to the basement, heart heavy, but not broken. Later that day, someone unexpected descended the stairs. Dr. Marcus Hahn, the family's private pediatrician. "I saw what happened yesterday," he said, "and I've been reviewing the footage. That wasn't random." Nathaniel responded to you. "That was real." Mariah hesitated. Then, for the first time in years, she told the truth. Her credentials, her research, her 17 published studies, her 43 case studies of neurodivergent children, many of whom now spoke multiple languages. Dr. Hahn was stunned. "You're telling me Nathaniel might not be severely autistic?" "He's on the spectrum, yes," Mariah explained. "But what he suffers from most is selective mutism, likely triggered by emotional trauma. His silence is not incapacity, it's protection. He shuts down because he hasn't been heard, not properly." Dr. Hahn believed her. He gave her his private number. "If you're willing to continue helping him, I'll back you medically, legally. But we must be careful." That night, Mariah made a phone call that reignited everything inside her. "Professor Blake," she said to the man on the other end. "It's Mariah. I need my research files, especially the ones on multilingual protocols and selective mutism." What she didn't know was that Sandra, the jealous housekeeper, had overheard everything. By morning, the truth had reached Eleanor. She summoned Mariah to her office again, this time with a laptop open to Mariah's academic profile, Columbia University, award-winning research, conference keynotes. "You lied to me," Eleanor hissed. "I didn't lie," Mariah replied. "You never asked. And from day one, you made it clear that someone like me had nothing of value to offer." Just then, Nathaniel burst into the room with Dr. Hahn. "Miss Mariah," he cried in Portuguese, then French, then Spanish. Eleanor stared, speechless, as her silent son, effortlessly switched between languages, smiling, alive, seen. Dr. Hahn showed the videos. Nathaniel counting in German, singing in Arabic, laughing in Mandarin. "You wanted proof," Mariah said quietly, kneeling beside Nathaniel. "Here he is." Eleanor's voice cracked. "You gave me back my son." Mariah nodded. "He was never lost. You just needed to see him." That moment changed everything. Today, the Wexler mansion echoes with joy. Nathaniel speaks 9 languages. The YouTube channel Learning with Nathaniel has gone viral. The Nathaniel and Mariah Foundation has helped over 10 neurodivergent children nationwide. Mariah now lectures at international conferences. Eleanor, once blind to others' worth, is now a fierce advocate for inclusive education. But the most powerful transformation didn't happen online or on stage. It happened in the eyes of a child who finally heard his voice, and in the heart of a mother who finally listened. Because sometimes, the greatest revolution begins with a whisper. They said he was broken. She heard brilliance. And the world would never be the same again. For most of his 7 years on Earth, little Nathaniel Wexler lived in silence. His mother, Eleanor Wexler, an icy, commanding heiress to a billion-dollar pharmaceutical empire, had spent millions on the best doctors, specialists, and therapies. The verdict from all 3 leading neurologists was unanimous. Nathaniel had severe autism, was unlikely to speak, and would never live a normal life. Eleanor accepted this as truth. To her, Nathaniel became a beautiful, fragile vase that must be kept on a high shelf, admired, protected, and untouched, until the day she caught her maid talking to him. Mariah James was not an ordinary maid. Behind her calm eyes and blue apron was a hidden life. A once celebrated linguistics professor with a PhD in applied linguistics from Columbia University, now working anonymously to support her ailing mother. In Eleanor's mansion, she was invisible, background noise in an empire obsessed with surface perfection. But Nathaniel noticed her. And she noticed him. While mopping floors and tidying bookshelves, Mariah would softly speak to herself in different languages: French, Spanish, Italian. To others, it was just habit. But to Nathaniel, it was music. He began to inch closer each day, following the sound. Mariah saw something familiar in his eyes, not confusion or disorder, but intense focus, quiet brilliance searching for connection. One morning, as she quietly murmured, "Bonjour," Nathaniel whispered back, "Hola." It was the first word he had spoken in 2 years. Mariah didn't celebrate or react with shock. She simply smiled and sat beside him on the floor, reading an Italian picture book aloud. No pressure, no expectations, just language, flowing like a river, inviting Nathaniel to wade in when he was ready. That fragile bridge of trust was shattered when Eleanor discovered them together. Her heels echoed furiously down the marble hallway. "Why are you talking to my son?" she snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "I was just cleaning," Mariah replied, not revealing that Nathaniel had just spoken. Eleanor's rage swelled. "He's not a project. He's sick. He doesn't speak. Don't fill his head with fantasy." Mariah wanted to scream the truth. Instead, she answered with grace. "Sometimes children don't need fixing. They just need to be spoken to in a language they understand." Eleanor dismissed her with disdain. The next morning, Mariah was reassigned to the basement, ordered to avoid any contact with Nathaniel. But fate had other plans. Later that day, Dr. Marcus Hahn, the family's longtime pediatrician, sought Mariah out. "I heard him," he said, his voice filled with quiet wonder. "He spoke French," he responded. "That wasn't random." Mariah hesitated, then revealed her past, her degrees, her 17 published papers, her 43 case studies with children once labeled hopeless who now thrived. She described Nathaniel's true condition: not severe autism, but selective mutism, paired with heightened auditory sensitivity. "He's not broken," she said. "He just shuts down when he doesn't feel safe." Dr. Hahn gave her his full support and his private number. Together, they began documenting Nathaniel's progress in secret. In the following weeks, the boy who once lived in silence began to bloom. He counted to 10 in German, sang a children's song in Arabic, whispered animal names in Swedish, Mandarin, and Portuguese. Every new language unlocked another layer of his mind. Meanwhile, Eleanor remained in denial until her world shattered again. One afternoon, the housekeeper, Sandra, jealous of Mariah's growing connection to Nathaniel, exposed Mariah's academic background to Eleanor. Furious, Eleanor confronted her. "You lied to me," she accused. "I never lied," Mariah replied calmly. "You never asked. From day one, you made it clear my value was based on my job title, not my knowledge." Eleanor was ready to fire her, until Nathaniel burst into the room, eyes shining. "Miss Mariah," he called out in Portuguese. Then, in French, "J'ai appris une chanson." Then, in Spanish, "Pudes and serms palabras." Eleanor was frozen. Dr. Hahn stepped in, tablet in hand. "We've been documenting his progress," he explained. One by one, the videos played. Nathaniel speaking, counting, singing, in 7 different languages. His cognitive ability, Dr. Hahn stated, was extraordinary. Eleanor collapsed into her chair, stunned. "I thought he'd never speak." Mariah crouched beside the boy. He just needed a safe space, and someone who believed he could. Tears spilled from Eleanor's eyes. You gave me back my son. No, Mariah corrected gently. You just finally saw who he always was. From that day forward, everything changed. Eleanor invited Mariah to stay, not as a maid, but as Nathaniel's official teacher and therapist. They launched a YouTube channel, Learning with Nathaniel, showcasing multilingual learning techniques for neurodivergent children. Within 4 months, the channel exploded with over 2 million followers. Donations poured in. The Nathaniel and Mariah Foundation was born, transforming the lives of thousands of children across the country. Mariah was offered professorships at Harvard, Stanford, Columbia. Her upcoming book, The Language of the Heart, became an instant bestseller. And Eleanor, once cold and detached, became a global advocate for inclusive education. But none of that mattered as much as the simple, beautiful truth. Nathaniel now laughed. He played. He spoke 9 languages. He sparkled with joy. The boy, they said, would never speak. Couldn't stop. One night, during dinner, Nathaniel stood and read a letter aloud. Dear Mom and Miss Mariah, he said, I used to feel like I was trapped in a glass box. Miss Mariah didn't break the box. She showed me it was never really there. 2 years later, standing on the main stage of the International Special Education Conference, Nathaniel spoke into the microphone. I'm here today because someone believed I had a voice, even when no one else did. The audience rose to their feet in a tearful ovation. And at that moment, the world didn't just hear Nathaniel speak, they finally listened. She came to the town as a mail-order bride, rejected for the color of her skin. But she left as the woman who rebuilt an entire community. When Amara Williams stepped off the train in the dusty town of Rosehaven, she carried 2 things, a worn suitcase and a hopeful heart. She had written dozens of letters to Harold Pierce, a white merchant who had promised companionship, respect, and a chance at a new life. But when Harold saw her, an elegant black woman in a modest dress and braided hair, his face twisted into disgust. You didn't say you were. Colored, he spat, loud enough for the station crowd to hear. I can't marry you. Gasps filled the platform. But Amara didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stood taller, met his eyes, and simply said, Then this is your loss, not mine. The man who witnessed the scene from a distance was Alexander Monroe, a wealthy landowner and respected farmer in Rosehaven. He had no patience for prejudice and even less for cruelty. He stepped forward, hat in hand, and offered Amara a place to stay until she could figure out her next move. You don't deserve this kind of welcome, he said gently. Amara, a former teacher from Boston with a quiet strength, accepted. What she didn't tell anyone yet was that she had come not just seeking a husband, but seeking justice. For weeks, she worked in Alexander's home, eventually taking charge of organizing his vast library. But as she settled in, she began digging into the dusty archives of the town's history. Old deeds, faded maps, letters and court transcripts. The deeper she looked, the more she uncovered a truth long buried. Her grandfather, Joseph Freeman, had once owned the very land that now made up much of Rosehaven. Joseph, a freedman and respected landowner, had mysteriously vanished in 1892, and his land was reclaimed by the founding families through forged documents and legal trickery. Among those families, the Pierces. Amara didn't want revenge. She wanted restoration. One evening, over tea, she confided in Alexander. This town was built on stolen land. My family's land. He didn't doubt her. Instead, he offered support. What do you need? A lawyer, a witness, and a chance to speak the truth. With Alexander's help, Amara presented her case to the town council, armed with authenticated documents, land records, and the testimony of an elderly neighbor who remembered her grandfather. Amara made her claim, not in anger, but in clarity. I don't want to tear this town down, she said. I want to rebuild it. with justice at its foundation. The council was stunned. Some tried to silence her. Others were ashamed. But the truth was undeniable. After weeks of public discussion and media attention, the town formally acknowledged the injustice. Amara could have demanded full restitution. She could have reclaimed dozens of acres and sued for millions. Instead, she did something no one expected. She donated the land back to the community under one condition. It would be used to create the Freeman Foundation, named after her grandfather. The land would house a public library, a cultural center, and an education scholarship fund for marginalized youth. Harold Pierce, once proud and smug, became a social outcast. His store went bankrupt. The town that once whispered cruel things behind Amara's back now praised her in the open. Months later, Alexander proposed, not out of charity, but love. "You came here looking for a new life," he said. "And in doing so, you gave this town a new soul. Will you let me walk beside you as you keep building it?" She said yes. The Freeman Cultural Center opened 1 year later with hundreds in attendance. Amara gave the keynote speech. "They tried to erase our history," she said. "But today, we write a new chapter 1 where truth matters more than pride, and where justice is not vengeance, but restoration." Today, the town of Rosehaven is no longer defined by the past, but by the transformation Amara sparked. Children of all backgrounds walk through the Freeman Library's doors. The scholarship fund has already sent 32 students to college, and every year, on the anniversary of her arrival, the town celebrates Founders Day not to honor those who took, but the woman who gave. Amara Williams, once rejected for the color of her skin, became the architect of a more just future. Because true legacy is not about land or wealth. It's about planting seeds of justice where his roots were once stolen. She came to grieve. But what she found was the truth. And the grandson she never knew existed. Victoria Langston, billionaire CEO of Langston Global Enterprises, visited her son's grave every August. It had become a ritual, a quiet, private act amid her world of power, money, and headlines. Her son, Adrian Langston, had died in a tragic car crash 2 years earlier. The world remembered him as a playboy, a businessman, a rebel. But to Victoria, he was her only child and her only legacy. On this particular morning, Victoria expected solitude. Instead, she found a young black woman kneeling at the grave holding a little boy who looked no older than 6. The woman was crying quietly, her fingers tracing Adrian's name carved into the stone. The child, hugging her tightly, whispered, "Mommy, is this where Daddy sleeps?" Victoria froze. Her first instinct was anger. Who was this woman? Why was she here at her son's grave? "I'm sorry," Victoria said, her voice cool, "but this is private property. I don't know who you are." The woman stood slowly, wiping her tears. "My name is Jasmine Washington. And this," she said, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, "is Tyler, Adrian's son." The world spun. Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I wish it were," Jasmine replied, her voice steady. "But Adrian knew. He left us a letter. In case something happened to him. He didn't know if you'd ever accept Tyler, so he asked me to raise him far from your world. Quietly. Safely." Victoria demanded proof, and Jasmine had it. Paternity tests, photos, voice messages, even a DNA match. The boy's eyes, blue as glacier ice, were Adrian's. His laugh, his stubborn chin, everything. Still, Victoria wasn't ready to accept it. "Why are you coming forward now?" "Because Tyler deserves more than hiding. He deserves to know where he comes from and why his father died." That last part hit hard. Jasmine wasn't just a grieving mother. She was prepared legally, emotionally, strategically. Raised by her aunt, Professor Helen Washington, a renowned law scholar, Jasmine had built a quiet but powerful case. Not only was Tyler the rightful heir to the Langston fortune, he was also the key to exposing something much darker, the truth behind Adrian's death. With the help of trusted journalists and legal experts, Jasmine had pieced together evidence that Adrian had been on the verge of blowing the whistle on his mother's empire. He had discovered decades of corporate fraud, bribery, and betrayal, especially involving Victoria's estranged cousin Robert, whose share of the company had mysteriously vanished. Adrian had been silenced, Jasmine claimed. Not by accident, but by fear. Victoria didn't believe it at first, but then Jasmine handed her a flash drive. Adrian gave this to me. He told me never to open it unless something happened to him. Inside were emails, financial ledgers, audio recordings, evidence that not only implicated board members, but directly tied back to Victoria herself. Cover-ups, manipulation, stolen, inheritance. The empire she built was rooted in betrayal. That night, for the first time in decades, Victoria couldn't sleep. In the following weeks, Jasmine and her team went public with everything. A live-streamed press conference exposed the hidden story behind Langston Global. Protests erupted. Whistleblowers came forward. Federal investigators stepped in. And just like that, the walls came crashing down. Victoria Langston was arrested on charges of tax evasion, corporate fraud, and obstruction of tax evasion. Justice. Her assets were frozen. Her name, once synonymous with power, became a symbol of corporate corruption. And Jasmine? She didn't run. She didn't celebrate. She stood calmly and explained her decision to the world. I didn't come for revenge. I came for truth, for my son, for Adrian, and for the families this company has hurt. The court awarded Jasmine full custody of Tyler and complete control over Adrian's rightful planked estate. But instead of hoarding wealth, she turned it into a mission. She founded the Tyler Langston Foundation, an organization dedicated to children who have been silenced, hidden, or forgotten. The foundation funds education, housing, and legal advocacy for marginalized families. She rebuilt what Victoria had destroyed with justice, compassion, and vision. Today, Tyler is thriving. He knows exactly who he is and where he comes from. His father's portrait hangs in their living room. His mother teaches him every day that strength isn't in power, it's in purpose. As for Victoria, she lives alone now, awaiting trial. Her fortune gone, her name disgraced. But the true punishment isn't legal, it's emotional. Every night, she dreams of her son's voice, of a little boy she never hugged, of the life she never knew, until it was too late. Because Jasmine never raised her voice. She didn't need to. She raised her son. She raised the truth. And that was more powerful than any empire. What began in a whisper between a cleaning lady and a silent child soon echoed across the world. When Mariah James first entered the Langston mansion, no one looked at her twice. She was just the new cleaning woman, quiet, respectful, forgettable. But inside her lived a mind that had once lectured at Columbia, published breakthrough research in linguistics, and mentored dozens of gifted but misunderstood children. Life had knocked her down, but not out. And when she crossed paths with 7-year-old Nathaniel Langston, a boy labeled as severely autistic and believed to be unreachable, everything changed. Through patience, intuition, and empathy, Mariah discovered that Nathaniel wasn't broken. He simply spoke a different kind of language. Within weeks, she unlocked his voice through multilingual engagement. And when Nathaniel went from silence to speaking in fluent French, Spanish, and German, the world around him began to take notice. But it didn't stop there. Dr. Marcus Hahn, the family's pediatrician, began recording Nathaniel's progress. Videos of him reciting poetry in Arabic, singing nursery rhymes in Mandarin, and holding full conversations in Italian and English became both evidence and inspiration. It was undeniable. Nathaniel wasn't just communicating. He was thriving. His story challenged everything. People thought they knew about neurodivergent children. Victoria Langston, once a skeptic and distant mother, had her heart cracked open. She apologized to Mariah and offered her a new role, not as a housekeeper, but as Nathaniel's official teacher, partner, and co-leader in a journey of transformation. Together, they launched something unprecedented, a YouTube channel called Learning with Nathaniel. The channel began as a way to document his language learning journey, but within weeks, it became a beacon for thousands of families across the globe. Mariah, soft-spoken but brilliant, used her platform to teach parents and educators how to engage neurodivergent children through multilingualism, emotional safety, and creative play. Nathaniel's joyful presence, switching languages mid-sentence with ease, became living proof that children labeled as disabled were often simply unheard. The response was explosive. Within 4 months, the channel surpassed 2 million subscribers. Videos were translated into over 20 languages. Families in Kenya, Canada, South Korea, Brazil, and Poland sent messages, videos, and testimonies of their own children speaking for the first time after trying Mariah's techniques. Donations began to pour in. In partnership with Victoria, Mariah created the Nathaniel and Mariah Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to serving neurodivergent children through apt education, therapy, and creative communication programs. In just 6 months, the foundation funded 15 schools in underserved communities and trained over 1,200 teachers worldwide. Meanwhile, the academic world could no longer ignore what was happening. Harvard, Stanford, and Columbia entered a bidding war to recruit Mariah as a tenured professor. 3 major publishing houses fought over the rights to her upcoming book, The Language of the Heart: How Multilingualism Transforms Special Children. It became a bestseller before its official release, with pre-orders topping 100,000 copies globally. But perhaps the most profound recognition came from the very world that once overlooked her. The American Pediatric Association invited Mariah to present her work at the National Conference on Neurodevelopment, where she received a standing ovation after her keynote. In the audience were doctors, educators, and parents moved to tears by her story and Nathaniel's quiet brilliance. "I was invisible in this society," Mariah said, standing on the conference stage. "Today I'm here not because I've changed, but because someone finally decided to see me." The same thing happened with Nathaniel. He always had this ability. I just created the environment where it could flourish. Next to her, now 8 years old, stood Nathaniel, smiling, confident, dressed in a little suit and bow tie. He stepped up to the microphone and said, in clear English, "A year ago, doctors said I would never speak. Today, I speak 9 languages, because Miss Mariah believed I had a voice." The audience rose to their feet. It wasn't just applause, it was a cultural shift, a collective realization that intelligence isn't always loud, and brilliance doesn't always come wrapped in convention. Back at the Langston estate, change was visible in every hallway. What was once a cold, silent mansion was now filled with the hum of music, laughter, conversation, and curiosity. Nathaniel's voice echoed through the rooms, sometimes in Swedish, sometimes in Swahili. He would run to his mother and proudly say things like, "Mama, I learned how to say love in Turkish today. Ask." Victoria smiled more now. She laughed. She lived. She once thought she needed to protect her son by shielding him from the world. Now, she was watching him shape it. Even Sandra, the jealous housekeeper who had once tried to sabotage Mariah, faced consequences. Her reputation crumbled after spreading lies. No wealthy family wanted someone known for gossip and malice. Meanwhile, Mariah stood tall, not with pride, but with quiet fulfillment. Dr. Han brought more good news. Mariah's article had just been accepted into Nature, Neuroscience, one of the world's leading journals. Her method wasn't just anecdotal, it was now scientifically backed and globally respected. But the most beautiful moment came one evening during dinner. Nathaniel stood up and read a letter he had written. "Dear Mama and Miss Mariah," he began. "Before, I felt like I was trapped in a glass box. I could see everything, but no one could hear me. Miss Mariah didn't break the box. She showed me there was never a box at all. And Mama, thank you for letting her teach me that I've always been perfect just the way I am." Tears filled Victoria's eyes. Mariah held her hand. 2 years later, the foundation had touched over 10,000 children's lives. Schools were transformed. Mothers no longer cried alone. And across the world, in languages both ancient and modern, children were finally speaking and being heard because of one woman who refused to be silenced and one child who finally found his voice. Nathan Caldwell once ruled boardrooms with an iron grip. As the CEO of one of the largest pharmaceutical empires in the country, he saw people as tools, not souls. He silenced dissent, buried truth, and mocked those he believed beneath him, including a quiet cleaning lady named Mariah James. When she began whispering words to his autistic grandson Nathaniel, Nathan dismissed her as delusional. But truth has a strange way of resurfacing, especially when whispered with love. In less than a year, the world watched Nathaniel blossom under Mariah's care. Diagnosed as severely autistic, he now spoke 9 languages fluently. The child Nathan once ignored became a global symbol of hope and neurodivergent brilliance. Meanwhile, Mariah, once invisible, rose to become a globally celebrated educator. And Nathan fell, stripped of power, exposed for past abuse and discrimination. Nathan was sentenced to prison. His empire crumbled. His name was erased from the walls he once built with pride. Alone and forgotten, he became the cautionary tale in a new era. One where empathy triumphs over ego and dignity matters more than dominance. Power without compassion is a house built on sand. You may stand tall for a while, but the storm of truth always comes. What truly endures isn't your title, but how you treat those who have none. If this story moved you, tell us. Have you ever been underestimated? What did you do to rise above? Subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that remind us respect has no rank, and dignity needs no permission.